The rain had been falling for days, turning the roads of northeastern France into dark rivers of mud. It's mid-November 1944, and every vehicle that moves leaves deep ruts like scars across the ground. The sky is low and gray, the kind of sky that crushes sound and makes even an army feel small. Somewhere ahead, beyond the wet fields and broken hedgerows, sits a city that German commanders have been calling Impregnable, Metz.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
A fortress town on the Moselle River, old stone walls, concrete bunkers, guns dug into hills, a place that has stopped armies before, and now, in the cold drizzle, American soldiers are staring at it the way a man stares at a locked steel door, knowing he has to get through it fast, or the whole war plan begins to slip. You can almost feel it in the air, the pressure of time. Not just military time, but human time. The kind measured in exhausted breaths, empty stomachs, and wet boots that never dry. General George S. Patton's Third Army has been driving hard across France since the breakout from Normandy, but by fall the pace is slowing. Fuel has been short. Supplies have lagged behind, and the weather is turning every field into glue. Still, Patton doesn't stop. He never wants to stop. And now he has Metz in front of him, a target that many officers quietly wish wasn't on the map. Because Metz isn't just another town. Metz is a problem with teeth. Metz sits in the Lorraine region, east of the Moselle. It's not far from the German border, and in 1944 it guards one of the main routes into Germany. That's why the Germans fortified it like a locked gate. The ring of forts around Metz goes back decades, some built when Germany controlled the area after 1871. Thick walls, underground galleries, concrete casemates that can swallow shells. Even if you take one fort, another can still fire into your path. It's a fortress system designed for one mission: slow down any army trying to pass. And in November 1944, that delay is exactly what Germany needs. Inside those forts and the city itself, German units are dug in. Among them are troops from General der Infanterie Heinrich Kittel's command, tied to the defenses around Metz. Some are regulars, some are replacements, some are hardened men who know exactly how to make a river crossing feel like a death sentence. Machine guns are positioned to rake bridges. Artillery is hidden where it can fire and vanish. Observation posts sit on high ground like eyes that never blink. Every approach route is watched. Every open field is mapped for fire. And while the American infantry tries to stay warm and dry, the Germans are already waiting, dry behind concrete and stone. Patton's headquarters knows what they're up against. The Moselle River is swollen. The banks are slick. The current is fast. It's not the kind of river you cross casually with rifles above your head. And behind it, the forts around Metz aren't just obstacles, they're traps. A careless push could cost thousands. Yet Patton is under pressure from above, the kind you can't ignore. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower needs momentum. He needs breakthroughs that can be turned into a drive toward the Rhine. He can't have an American army stuck in front of one fortress while winter closes in. And Patton knows it too. Patton has a reputation by this point that spreads faster than his tanks. He's bold, he's impatient, he's sharp-tongued. He demands speed, he demands aggression. But the truth is more complicated. Patton also understands logistics better than most people give him credit for. He understands that if Metz can be taken cleanly, it opens routes and protects his flank for what comes next. The city is a key. Not for glory, but for movement, for supply lines, for breaking the German defensive belt in Lorraine. The problem is, Metz doesn't want to open. The first assaults in September had already shown how hard it would be. Patton's men had pushed toward the Moselle with high hopes, only to be slowed by tough defenses and the simple reality of war. You can't drive a tank through a river without a bridge, and you can't build a bridge under fire without paying in blood. In October, heavy rain and German resistance turned the campaign into a grind. The Third Army fought for crossings, built pontoon bridges, and tried to widen bridgeheads. It was hard, close work, the kind of fighting where every hedgerow might hide a machine gun and every farmhouse might have a cellar full of enemy rifles. Meanwhile, Metz sat there like a stone fist. By early November, Patton is ready to finish it. He knows that if he keeps nibbling at the edges, Metz will keep consuming time. So he plans a tighter, harder squeeze. Not a proud charge straight into the center, but a method that traps the city and its forts, cutting them off and forcing them down one by one. It's ugly work. It's not the kind of battle people imagine when they think of Patton's fast armor raids. This is infantry, engineers, artillery, and careful coordination, moving through mud under cold rain, taking forts that refuse to die. On November 8, 1944, the pressure rises. Patton's Third Army begins the final phase of the offensive against Metz. The place names along the front become the daily vocabulary of tired men: the Moselle crossings near places like Dorneau and Arneville, the fields and villages that sit under the shadow of Fort Driant, Fort Jeanne d'Arc, Fort Saint-Quentin, and other massive strong points around the city. Each fort is its own battle. Some have deep underground chambers, some have steel doors that won't crack. Some keep firing even after direct hits, because the gunners are buried behind meters of concrete. You can almost see the scene at the river line. Engineers in soaked uniforms working with numb hands, trying to get bridging equipment into place while artillery booms overhead. Infantrymen crouched in mud, waiting for the signal to move, looking at the opposite bank like it's another planet. Every step forward feels heavy, because the ground itself fights you. Then the shells come in, German artillery ranging in, walking explosions across the banks. Dirt and water spray into the air. Men shout warnings that vanish into the rain. Somewhere in the chaos, a lieutenant checks his watch, not because the minutes matter, but because it reminds him the world is still running. Patton keeps pushing. He drives his corps commanders to move, to exploit any opening. Major General Walton H. Walker's 20th Corps becomes the main hammer in the fight for Metz. Walker is not Patton, but he shares one key trait. He can take pressure and still think clearly. Under him, divisions like the 95th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Victory Division, move into the brutal work of closing on the city. The 90th Infantry Division, toughened by earlier fighting, is also in the mix. These are not troops arriving fresh and confident. These are men who have been in combat for months. They've learned that a single German machine gun can pin down a company, and that a concrete fort doesn't care about your courage. The Germans do what fortress defenders always do. They hold. They counterattack in small, sharp bursts, trying to keep American units off balance. They use the forts as artillery platforms and shelters. They fire from hidden positions and disappear into tunnels. Even when American guns pound a fort for hours, the defenders often come back up and fire again, because the structure is built for exactly that purpose. It feels like fighting a stone animal that won't bleed. Patton's artillery begins to shape the battlefield. The Third Army's guns are relentless. They fire in the cold rain, barrel after barrel, sending shells into suspected strongpoints, into road junctions, into the edges of the city. The goal is not just destruction, but control, forcing the Germans to keep their heads down while infantry moves closer. Tank destroyers and medium tanks fire at visible embrasures, trying to smash openings or silence guns. But forts don't always show their weak points. Sometimes the only way is to get close, almost painfully close, and attack with explosives and flame. The fighting is personal now, small groups moving through shattered villages, checking each building, advancing yard by yard. A squad leader kicks in a door and feels his heart jump because the room is empty. But the cellar might not be. A rifleman steps around a corner and sees a slit in the wall where a German rifle can appear at any second. The weather makes everything worse. Wet weapons, muddy boots, cold hands that struggle to reload. It's not glorious, it's survival. As the days pass, Metz begins to feel less like a fortress and more like a cage that's tightening. American units push around the city, taking ground and cutting routes. Bridges, roads, and rail lines become targets. The goal is to isolate the forts so they can't support each other, so the defenders can't move freely, so the entire system becomes a series of disconnected islands. That's how you break something impregnable, not with one massive blow, but by starving it of options. Inside Metz, German commanders face a growing nightmare. Supplies shrink. Communications become unreliable. The weather keeps Allied aircraft limited, but artillery does enough. Every time a German unit tries to shift, it risks being caught in the open. And Patton's men are getting better at dealing with the forts. They learn which angles matter, which routes offer cover, where the blind spots might be. They use engineers to breach obstacles. They bring up heavy weapons. They keep pressure on, not allowing the defenders to rest. By November 18th, 1944, the end is in sight. The last defenses start cracking. It isn't that every fort has been blown apart, it's that the defense is no longer coherent. The city can't hold when its outer belt is collapsing and American forces are pressing from multiple directions. The German defenders are brave, stubborn, and sometimes fanatical, but bravery doesn't create food or ammunition, and stubbornness doesn't rebuild shattered lines. Metz, which had been called impossible to take quickly, is now slipping away. On November 19, 1944, Metz falls to American forces. The date matters because it marks the moment the locked gate finally gives way. After weeks of hard fighting, the city is taken. Some forts continue resisting even after the city itself is occupied, and some defenders hold out in underground positions. But the strategic point is clear. Metz is no longer blocking the route. Patton's Third Army has done what many thought would cost far more time. In the middle of rain and mud, with winter closing in, the fortress has been beaten. And that's when the story turns to the line everyone remembers. The moment when Dwight D. Eisenhower reacts. Eisenhower was not a man who tossed out praise casually. He could be warm, but he was careful. As Supreme Allied Commander, he had to manage egos as much as armies. He had Montgomery, Bradley, Patton, and others under him. Strong personalities, competing ideas, different styles. If he praised one too openly, it could unbalance relationships. Yet Patton's capture of Metz mattered. It wasn't just a city. It was proof that the American armies could break the German border defenses. It was proof that momentum could be restored. So when Eisenhower acknowledged the achievement, and it carried weight. The message, remembered in different forms in later accounts, was essentially a statement of respect for what Patton's men had done against a fortress that had been hyped for years. The feeling behind it was clear. Metz had been a hard nut, and Third Army had cracked it. It was a victory that helped set up the next moves toward the Saar and deeper into Germany, even as the war continued to demand more sacrifices. But the real point, the part that matters for understanding this moment, is what the capture of Metz meant for Patton himself. Patton wanted speed, he wanted to keep rolling, yet Metz forced him into a kind of battle he didn't love. Slow, methodical, expensive work against concrete and stone. And he still won. Not with magic, not with reckless charges, but with combined arms and persistence. It showed that his reputation wasn't only built on open-field tank warfare. No, it showed he could fight a fortress fight and still come out on top. For the men of Third Army, Metz was a test of endurance. The campaign in Lorraine had been brutal and often overlooked in popular memory because it didn't look like a clean breakthrough. It looked like mud, rain, and slow progress. But that's exactly what makes it important. Winning in war isn't always about the dramatic moments. Sometimes it's about solving the ugly problems that block the road. Metz was one of those problems. And when it fell, it didn't just open a path, it changed the mood across the Allied command. You can imagine the feeling among American soldiers on the day the city was secured, not cheering in the streets like a parade, but a quieter kind of relief. The kind where a man sits down in a doorway with his helmet still on because he's too tired to take it off. The kind where someone lights a cigarette with shaking fingers, not because it tastes good, but because it gives his hands something to do. Or the kind where a corporal looks toward the forts in the distance and realizes the firing has finally slowed. For once, the sky might feel a little less heavy. Metz didn't end the war, not even close. The Germans would still launch their last great offensive in the West a month later, in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, starting on December 16, 1944. Winter would still hit hard. Men would still freeze and fight in forests and ruined towns, and Patton would still be called north in a hurry, and turning his army to relieve Bastogne in one of the most famous moves of the entire campaign. But before that, there was Metz, and Metz mattered. Because the capture of Metz was more than a map update. It was proof that the Allies could break the old German-style fortress defenses, proof that the Moselle line could be crossed and held, proof that the push toward Germany could continue even under terrible conditions. It was also a reminder that no position is truly impregnable when an enemy is willing to keep pressing, learning, and adapting. And that's the final twist of this story. Metz was supposed to be a wall, a delay, a warning. The Germans believed it would cost the Americans so much time and blood that winter would save them. But Patton's men, soaked and exhausted, did not accept that. They pushed through the rain. They fought across the Moselle. They hammered the forts. They tightened the ring. And on November 19th, 1944, the fortress city that had been talked up as untouchable was in American hands. So when people ask, what did Eisenhower say when Patton captured Metz? The best way to understand it isn't just as a single quote. It's as a moment of recognition, a moment where the Supreme Commander had to look at what Third Army had just done and accept the truth. Patton had taken a fortress city that was never supposed to fall quickly, and he had done it in the worst kind of weather, under the worst kind of pressure, with the clock ticking toward winter. And if you could stand there on those muddy roads outside Metz and listen to the last artillery echoes fade into the gray sky, you'd understand why that mattered. Because in war, speed is powerful, but breaking the enemy's strongest points is what keeps the road open. Metz was one of those points, and Patton, with his Third Army, forced it open anyway.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.